Welcome to another episode of the Rank 'em Podcast. I'm Garrett Seawright, as always, joined with my good friend Don Garwood. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at Rank 'em Podcast. Also, wherever it is you download your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we are there. Give us a 5-star review, like, subscribe, tell your friends, send them a fax, however you can help us out. We certainly do appreciate it. Joining us remotely is my good friend Don Garwood.
It was the best of times. I still have my effect on.
No, you don't.
It was the worst of times.
It was the best and blurst of times. Don is joining us remotely, and joining me across the table is my younger brother, Zach Seawright.
How we doing?
Zach gets to use the big boy mic for the first time in the Rank 'em Podcast.
Pretty excited. This is. I feel like I made it.
You didn't, but
I, for one, am not a fan.
Yeah,
that is my mic.
that is Don's microphone.
I'm also using your headset too, Don. So it's a double whammy.
Disgusts me.
So we've got that going on. Before we get to our episode today, we are going to reach into the vault, something we recorded a few weeks ago. But before we get into the vault, Don has a cat.
I do. It's new today.
A recent addition to his home. He has a cat. So do you have a name for this cat?
Not yet. It's right now it's still Kitty.
Can folks submit suggestions on our Twitter or Facebook pages?
Ooh, they certainly can. It's going to have a name by the time this comes out, though.
That's fine.
It'll have an unofficial nickname then.
Oh, yep. So that every time it's referenced on the podcast,
right.
It'll go by that
to protect
nickname.
the identity of your cat, we have given him an alias. Is it a boy or a girl?
Girl.
I thought for sure you were going to be like, pending. Haven't figured that out yet.
It hasn't decided yet.
We're going to let it get a little older and then decide for itself.
I thought for sure that's where you were going, Don. But this week we are reaching into the vault since Don's working remotely. We are going to rank this week our top 5 favorite books we've read in school. Anything stand out to you in this episode, Don?
It was actually pretty heated towards the end. But it wasn't necessarily people. Well, I guess I did not like your number one book. I don't think your number one book was on my list at all.
I don't believe so.
And we both hated Zach's number one book. Or no, it might have been a book that wasn't even on it. I think it was a book that wasn't on anybody's list, but is like generally accepted to be one of the best books of all time.
Yeah, we all hated Scott's.
And we all hated it. And then we go in hard on the post show.
We do. We talk about explicitly, full frontal, about how awful that book is and why we don't understand why it's so highly regarded. So you got that.
I don't think we matched up too many books between us either. And we talk a lot about the movie version of these books.
Yeah, we do. And that's how you know you got a good book there is when it's turned into a movie, as evidenced by the Twilight series, of course.
Right.
Exactly. Like the Hunger Games series or the Harry Potter series.
Well, I feel that there's just more to remember from a movie than there is a book, because, you know.
Ooh, I Am Legend.
I'll give you that.
Was also a really good movie book. Because the book, it was more of a novella.
Right.
So it was like super short. It was only like 200 pages. But they still managed to leave out some pretty interesting stuff in the movie.
Well, if you watch The Omega Man starring Charlton Heston, it's a little bit more true to the book than I Am Legend is. But it's old school. And it's a solid flick.
I could tell that when you said starring Charlton Heston. I didn't think it came out in 2016.
Well, I mean, he's been dead since like 2010, so.
Yep, that's why I assumed that it was.
I didn't realize Charlton Heston was dead. Honest to God.
Quick Googling here, but I know he's been dead. I think he's been dead since I was in high school.
All right, well.
Let's take a look. See, Charlton Heston died 2008.
Wow.
You know, when you were in high school.
Maybe.
Depending on the day.
He died right before we graduated.
Okay.
Well, boom.
So how about that? All right, so speaking of times we graduated, this is us reaching into the vault for the latest episode of the Rank 'em Podcast. We are going to rank our 5 favorite books. So this week on the Rank 'em Podcast, we're going to rank our top 5 favorite books that we read in school, and not just high school, from sixth grade on. So I hope that doesn't change anybody's lists.
I might have to take If You Give a Moose a Muffin off of my list.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of worried about that. We should have went over the ground rules before we made our lists. We did allow for plays. So, if somebody would just loved Midsummer Night's Dream or Romeo and Juliet, I forget who I was. Mercutio, is that a guy?
That sounds like a word.
That might have been who I was when our class read Romeo and Juliet. So
is Lucinda a person?
It sounds like a font on Microsoft Word. So I don't know. I think is Lucinda Cinderella's sister. I'm pretty sure Lucinda is Cinderella's sister. So
I'm not seeing it.
You hit that up on the Google machine.
There are some words that are Lucinda, but I'm not seeing anything relevant to anything.
Gotcha. So we are going to rank
a name.
We are going to rank our top 5 favorite books that we read in school, and the three of us went to the same high school. So we might have some different. We had to read different word books that Zach had to read and things like that.
I didn't read several of them that we were supposed to.
So, in all transparency, the list of 5 was rough for Don. That
I got up to 9 that I had.
Oh, okay.
That I had read.
You had vague.
They were assigned in school. I might have read them after school, but they were assigned in school.
So, with that said, Zach is our guest. Zach, we'll let you go first with your number 5.
My number 5 pick was Where the Red Fern Grows.
Old Dan Little Ann.
Old Dan Little Ann.
Who wrote Where the Red Fern Grows? I have no idea.
I honestly couldn't tell you. I was thinking that a couple minutes ago, and I was just like, we were cleaning out stuff at Grandma's house the other day, and we found Uncle Mike's copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. So that has been taught in school for 40 years.
That printed on asbestos?
Yeah.
Written by Wilson Rawls.
All right.
Sure,
totally.
I believe it was printed on the same thing the Declaration of Independence was printed on.
Gotcha. So we're just on old papyrus script.
But it's an American classic. It's just about it's a great story about a kid and his dogs.
What is the one thing that you remember from that book? Like the thing that sticks out when you think Red Fern Grows, what sticks out in your head?
Old Dan and Little Ann every time.
Not one specific event from the book?
Like,
because I think in each of these there's one thing that kind of sticks out.
I always like the initial hunt that he goes on for a raccoon so he can get the skin to train the dogs, because he's running all around because he's trying to catch this ghost coon, and and he cannot find it. And then he sticks his hand in this fence post and punches it, and it pops up, runs off, and Old Dan and Little Ann take care of it. And that's how he trains the dogs.
And I think, like a lot of these books, or at least the books on my list, there were movies made on them. And I'm guessing that it was made probably for high school kids so that, hey, you read this book, now watch a movie. So there's a little reward at the end of the tunnel for it. But, I mean, I think I've watched the Where the Red Fern Grows movie within probably the last 5 or 6 years. It doesn't hold up, but I could go for a reboot.
But when you are, so the movie doesn't hold up, but...
No, I mean, the book is still good.
Right. And that was like the ultimate tearjerker in 6th grade, that there's dudes in your class crying because... Spoiler alert, Lil Ann dies and old Dan just starves himself to death.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah, I was thinking it's the other way around.
I think it's the opposite.
See, because I think
it's old Dan dies, and then
Little
in the fight with the bobcat, and then Lil Ann dies. I don't know why that voice popped up, but I assume it's because of the white trash kid that kills himself on his own axe.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yep. They're shaped.
Book is dark. Why would you let children read this?
So it's whoever the main kid from this story is. Anybody know who the kid who isn't a dog is?
Who cares about the people in the book? It's all about old Dan and Little Ann.
Billy Coleman. I already had it pulled up here when I looked up the author. So Billy Coleman. He has the rival who's that kid with the super cool dog, and they're in some kind of tournament, and the kid pulls out an axe, presumably to kill either the kid or his dogs, and then they're chasing after something or other, and then he trips over a log and falls on the axe.
Right. Forgot about that. It's a good call, Don. Yeah. So Where the Red Fern Grows comes in at number 5 on Zach's list. Don, what about you?
Number 5, I have The Outsiders.
Oh, S.E. Hinton. First appearance on the list.
Yeah, I assume that you guys are going to have it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But The Outsiders was Pony Boy, Soda Pop.
Old Soda Pop.
Gotta
stay golden, Pony Boy. Stay golden, Pony Boy.
I still bring out some Stay Golden Pony
100%.
Boys. And
yeah.
I don't know if they still read this book because any like younger kids that I say that to don't get it. And
you might as well be like, back in my day, you could play a song on the jukebox for a nickel.
Back in my day, you couldn't get on the internet and the telephone at the same time.
Stay golden, Pony Boy.
Right. The thing, the big gang fight is the part of that book that sticks out to me when like half of the cast dies, and then
it was like fight. The original Red Wedding,
right?
in The Outsiders.
Like I don't know if we read The Outsiders first or probably read Where the Red Fern Grows first.
I think Where the Red Fern Grows was in 6th grade, I believe, and I think The Outsiders was 7th.
Okay, I was going to say it might have been like it was probably the first book that most people read where they kill off the half of the main cast.
Yeah,
and then the movie was played by like some A-list, if not at the time, A-list now celebrities.
Oh yeah,
100. Yeah,
oh yeah.
Rob Lowe, Ralph
Cruise?
Macchio, Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze, Emilio Estevez, and then Matt Dillon, who probably most people don't know, but if you saw Entourage, he is the older brother from Entourage.
When that came out, like Matt Dillon was the star,
right?
And everybody else was ancillary characters. And then
was the Karate Kid? Was he Pony Boy?
I think
Ralph Macchio.
I thought Ralph Macchio was Soda Pop.
Ralph Macchio was Johnny Cade. C. Thomas Howell was Pony Boy. Rob Lowe was Soda Pop.
I haven't seen that movie since probably.
Who was C. Thomas Howell?
Since probably 7th grade.
Oh, he's familiar too.
Old Pony Boy Curtis.
Pony Boy has a familiar looking face, and I'm trying to see what he was in.
Nothing that I recognize.
He was the kid from E.T.? Is that what I'm seeing here?
I don't know. We can move on.
Yeah. Yep, we're ready for yours.
So my number 5 was Hatchet. I don't know if you guys remember the book Hatchet, but it was written by Gary Paulson that Brian Robeson, I think was his name, that their plane crashed, and basically the only thing he had to survive on in the wilderness was a hatchet.
Until he went diving in the lake into the airplane and find that survival 22.
That's right. Yep,
Yeah.
that's
Which my dad had like the survival rifle 22 where it all folds up into the buttstock, and that thing's super cool.
so as a 12-year-old, you thought like, this is relatable. I know what that is.
No, I didn't know that he had it until I was like 18.
Oh,
I was like, hey, this is the thing from Hatchet.
Probably for the best. But it's a really, really good book, and I haven't read it since then, but now that I was sitting here thinking about this list, I should pull that bad boy out at some point and read it again, because it's just I really, really enjoyed that book. Just the trials that Brian went through to survive and hope somebody found him. And I mean, you can imagine being at that age, being stuck in the wilderness, thinking like, how in the hell am I going to get out of this situation when I got a hatchet? Like I got a small axe.
Right.
That's what I got. Got the clothes on my back and a small axe.
That also taught me about like water refraction, because in there they talk about how he's trying to like stick fish with a stick to go fishing, and he has to like aim below him because water refracts light. And that's something that I know now because of that book.
Well, and even like they talk about, shaving magnesium to start a fire and things like things like that for some ungodly reason you keep with you from when you're reading it when you're 11 or 12 to now that we're 30. You're talking about stuff you learned in real life from that book.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that, and I speaks to how highly I think of the 4 above it that I really love that book, and it's at number 5 on my list.
Full disclosure, I completely forgot about that book, and I'm upset that I did.
Well, and there was another book that that might be on somebody else's list that I didn't think about until I started going through. Like, I tried to think earlier, what books did we read in 6th grade? What books did we read in 7th grade? And I forgot about one completely until right now. So it's now on my honorable mention. But those are our number 5s. My number 4 is The Outsiders, which Don already talked about, maybe more of the movie than the book, but it is a good book, and it is weird at that kind of time in your life that, you know, every story you've ever been told has been, and everybody lived happily ever after in sunshine and rainbows, and S.E. Hinton's like, they all die.
An 8-year-old gets stabbed in the stomach with a switchblade.
Exactly.
And watches his brother and best friend die.
And you're like, how do I handle this? As a 11-year-old boy, I guess we'll figure it out.
What were the names of the warring factions?
The Greasers and the
I was going to
Socials.
say
And
the
the
Greasers.
Socials.
I knew the Greasers, but so I got The Outsiders at number 4 on my list. Don, what about you?
At number 4, I've got The Giver.
Ooh.
See, that was the book I forgot about completely and I was like, oh, Jonas and the Giver, and the awful movie that they made a few years ago.
I haven't watched the movie.
It's so bad. Because the book is badass.
The book is really cool, and they leave it up for a lot of interpretation, and it's got Dumbledore on the cover of it. I'm assuming.
I don't think that's who that is.
I don't think that's who it is, but it's like it wakes up, and there's a lot of stuff that you didn't understand when you read it in our freshman year, 8th grade, whenever
I think
we were in
7th.
6th or 7th grade.
Oh God! But whenever
we were in 7th grade,
when we read this, it starts off and he has a wet dream about this girl, and then has to get sent to like essentially this camp where they repress all of your emotions and blah 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 blah.
and they figure out what you're going to do to help the community.
Right, and he is this. He ends up being the person who gets to know all of this knowledge, and he can't take it, and so he's going to try and escape.
He's going to steal his baby while he does it.
He steals a random baby, tries to escape so that they didn't release him, which is just murdering him.
Just straight out, like, we're going to take you out back, Old Yeller style.
Right.
Nobody's going to hear the gun, but that's how it ends.
And I think it ends with him, like, bobsledding down a mountain, and he sees, like, a town and lights in the distance, and I think they wrote a sequel to it, and it's essentially like that town is like another sanctuary that's just like that, and it's like him trying to escape it or something like that.
That's dark. That sucks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to bed tonight. Thanks for that, Don. But that's the book that I was talking about that I completely forgot that. I forgot that it even existed until I'm re-racking my brain thinking about Hatchet and go, oh my God, The Giver. It's a lot to take in 7th grade. That there are deeper themes in that book than you can probably really handle at that time. Zach, what about you on your number 4?
My number 4, it was a late addition to the list because we originally said no plays, but then we decided we were going to let plays in. And so when we did that, I actually took Hatchet off of my list to add this play, and I went with The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I think it was one of the best plays ever written. The fact that it is, loosely based, but also pretty well based on the Salem witch trials and what happened. It's just a really good book. You got the old guy getting crushed with the rocks, and when they're trying to get him to confess, all he keeps saying is, more weight, more weight. Then you got the movie, because like you guys said, they make these movies just for high school kids, that's their reward for getting through the book.
See, that one was not made for high school. That one,
right.
When you get Daniel Day-Lewis to be in your movie.
Right.
Did we go and watch this play?
Yes, we did.
We went to like Fort Wayne.
Yeah, we went to like IPFW.
Yeah, I think we did.
But just Daniel Day-Lewis delivers a performance of a lifetime. When at the end of the movie, or at the end of the play, when he has to sign his name.
Spoiler alert.
This movie's 30 years old.
It's pretty close.
When he is confessing to being a witch so they don't kill him, and they say he has to sign his name, and he's just like, you've taken everything else from me, leave me my name. And they're like, no, sign this paper or we're killing you. And he said,
John Proctor?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's like, fine, do it. And then
they're all saying the Lord's Prayer, and they're kicking buckets out from under them while they're hanging them.
And I think the whole premise of this is that, like, he wouldn't sleep with the one girl, and she's
Yes.
like, then he's a witch.
Well,
so the problem was he did stick his dipstick in the oil once or twice and then tried to cut it off.
Gotcha.
And she wasn't having it.
Gotcha.
We can talk more about that book here in a little bit. So that is Zach's number 4?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So, Don, what is your number 3 on the list?
Number 3 on my list is Of Mice and Men. We read it sophomore year of high school.
Yep.
And it was the most outrageously offensive book they ever let us read.
Yeah, it's not.
There's a lot of words in that book that you can't really say at all.
Or not.
Especially not as a 16-year-old.
That are not socially acceptable for people of our heritage to say.
Right. And like the book like a lot of things draw from that book. The end of it, spoiler alert, where George kills the one girl because he was stroking her hair too hard, breaks her neck. Or Lenny does that, and then like George goes and sits him down. He's like, "Hey, think of the bunnies, Lenny."
Yeah,
and
tell me about the rabbits.
Shoots him in the back of the head. I mean, that was essentially duplicated in The Walking Dead when Carol,
Look at the flowers.
of
Look at the
Mice
flowers.
and Men, that little girl told her to look at the flowers and shot her in the back of the head after she murdered her sister.
It's a spoiler alert. I've got it at number 3 on my list too.
I also have it at number 3 on my list. So
it's a really it's super short. Like, I'm sitting here holding the copy that we got in 2005, and damn it, I paid $1.95 for it 15 years ago. I'm keeping it. It's 107 pages, and this is probably 12 font. Like,
Right.
if this was any bigger, it's a super short book. It's a quick read, and John Steinbeck writes it in a instead of what would you have me do, it'll say what do you have me do. Like, he wrote it the words as the people talked. Right. So it's super easy to read, but the theme of it being George is Lenny's security blanket at all times, but George uses Lenny as a security blanket just as much as the other way. Like, they rely on each other so much that George wants it to seem like Lenny's just this big dumb oaf that he's got to take care of. Well, no, he's a security blanket for George too. I don't want to get crazy philosophical in the book.
Do we know what causes them to like be on the run at the beginning?
I think it's just like the
They're
depression. It's the Dust
just
Bowl.
traveling, trying to find
they're
work.
just trying to find work.
Traveling.
I didn't know if it was
field
like
hands.
I didn't know if it was like Lenny had a
I believe
prior engagement.
there is a remember what you done in
Wichita,
right? Insert town here, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm sorry about that, George." So,
But I don't think it's I killed Curly's wife.
right? So it's not like the dude from the Green Mile where he's just
there's no
Right.
John Coffey.
right.
No, but I'm glad you guys enjoy this book as much as I do. Every once in a while, I just sit down. It's 107 pages. It's a
Afternoon.
2-hour read, and that's as an adult where you got to stop and go to the bathroom 3 times in those 2 hours, and play with the dog, or the mail's here, I got to mow the yard, whatever. It's a really great read. So it's number 3 on all of our lists for our favorite books that we read in school. Zach, what is on your list in the number 2 spot?
In the number 2 spot, it's a book that has already been mentioned, but I have The Outsiders. It's a book that opens your eyes as a child to not all stories have a happy ending. That, like you said, Don, that in the Rumble, half the cast dies, and an 8-year-old kid gets killed with a switchblade, and one of them sitting there just swinging around his broken arm in a cast like it's a billy club. I mean, like, this is like how descriptive this fight is amazingly well written, and then the movie translates it so well. And Patrick Swayze's character is the older brother, and he's just like, I got to take care of my little brothers, and I got to take care of their friends because like none of them have parents. And then Matt Dillon's character's like, no, let's just go fight people. And it turns out that the world isn't all sunshine and lollipops. That unfortunately there are consequences for your actions. Sometimes you accidentally burn a church down. We've all been there.
I have not. I'll be honest with you. I have not been there.
For legal reasons.
Yeah. For statute of limitation reasons, I have not been there.
The legal staff here is telling me I have to say that was a joke. But it's just a solid book.
Well, I think at that age, everybody's like, oh, my life sucks. I've got it so rough. And then you read about these kids who are killing rats and eating them and stuff to survive. And like, oh, maybe it's not so bad here in Podunk, Ohio. So Outsiders, number 2 on Zach's list. I have The Crucible at number 2 on my list. I agree with Zach that it's one of the best plays ever written, but it was written at a time where McCarthyism was running rampant in the United States, that everybody was a communist if you didn't agree with the people in power. And it's written sort of in that similar vein, that making the comparison to the Salem witch trials and McCarthyism, that so many people hold powers that can say so many things that aren't true. And the story is phenomenal, the movie is phenomenal, but Arthur Miller, I think, did a great job telling that story and making the comparison at the time. So I really loved The Crucible at the time, and I think it still holds up today, even being written in the 1950s and reading it when I was 16 and watching the movie when I was 16. It's just a really phenomenal piece of work. Don, your number 2?
Number 2 has already been mentioned. It was Zach's number 5. It's Where the Red Fern Grows. It was probably the first book, like real book, that I read growing up. Like, you read like short stories or whatever,
right?
The smaller schools, intermediate or whatever it is, and then you kind of like get your first big book. And for me, the first one I remember is Where the Red Fern Grows. And I mean, still you think of Little Ann and Old Dan, and the part that sticks out to me wasn't like the kid killing himself with the axe like that I had brought up earlier, but it's how he traps his first raccoon that the dogs don't kill, and that's that he goes out and goes out and puts like a piece of tinfoil in a log.
Little Billy puts a piece of tinfoil on a log,
and the raccoon reaches into the log, grabs the tinfoil, and won't let go. So it's stuck in there overnight. It's got this shiny piece of thing at once. Can't get its hand out because it's in a fist, and he walks out the next morning, like clubs it over the head and kills it or whatever. And that's like the.
Well, he put nails in that hole too, didn't he?
That's a real possibility.
Like, so
read the book 20 years ago.
Read the book 20 years ago. So it's that the raccoon won't unmake a fist.
The point in that book is like, if he just let it go, he could get out. And his dad, like, who was very against him getting the dogs in the first place, his dad was like, "You're never going to trap a raccoon like that. I understand you need the first one like that. You're never going to do that again." It's like extremely cruel to the animal,
right.
That you're doing that. But that's the part that sticks out to me and that I remember when I think of Little Ann and Old Dan and the Red Fern, Where the Red Fern Grows. Also, he hiked like 3 days to go and get them.
Yeah,
like 9 months after the newspaper article ran about them. It's like, hey, we have dogs here. Send in your stuff. And he like hiked 3 days to the post office to send in like this 50 cents and then
go pick up his
dogs.
dogs.
That from a newspaper article from 9 months before or whatever it was. Or maybe that's just how it seemed in the book.
So before we give our number 1 answers, let's go through our honorable mentions. I have Frankenstein. I thought it was... It's crazy how the book has been turned into a series of really crappy movies.
Yeah.
that you can tell who's taking the time to read the book. They're like, oh, Frankenstein. No. Frankenstein is the doctor. He is not the...
Right.
That's
Frankenstein's monster.
I was saying, even the monster was like not all oafish. Right, he wasn't that. He was articulate. I mean, he had the mind of a child, so he didn't understand things, but he was still a conscious being of capable thought.
Right, he wasn't just a green zombie
right.
eating brains. So I got Frankenstein. I also have Night by Elie Wiesel about the Holocaust.
It's definitely one that I skipped.
Well, and I was just like,
I almost put that on my honorable mention.
I had it at number 5 before I remembered Hatchet, and then I dropped Night to honorable mention, and then we talked about The Giver. So those are my honorable mentions. Zach, what about you?
Like I said, I originally had Hatchet in the number 4 spot, but when we included plays, it got bumped down to honorable mention. Like Don said, it is a great book where you do actually learn some survival skills from this book. It actually has it has a sequel, and then it also has a what if spinoff of what if he never got rescued. I don't know what happens in either book, but
I'm
going
to guess that he dies on the island if he never gets rescued.
He dies?
I mean, yeah. But then I also have Lord of the Flies.
Didn't read it.
What happened? Did you read the sequel?
We were
to
not-
Hatchet?
I've never read the sequel.
Because does it get on another plane? Because
if I remember correctly,
It's a really short story. He gets on the plane now with his dad. Flight lands safely in Winnipeg, and he lives the rest of his life happily.
But he snaps
with that hatchet.
If I remember correctly, the sequel to Hatchet, he is training some folks in the military. I know, because he is teaching them survival skills, and he survives yet another plane crash, if I remember correctly, and has to. The guy from the military who's he is teaching survival tactics to, breaks his leg or whatever, and he has to float him down a river to civilization or something like that.
Gotcha.
Like I said, I've never read it. I just know it exists. But then my other honorable mention was Lord of the Flies, which is another kid surviving a plane crash and having to survive book. But I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about doing a all-female version of this, and the author is 100% against it because because the book is about what happens when you give privileged men free reign, and they try to form a society, and it quickly falls apart. So,
Gotcha. We were not assigned Lord of the Flies.
Gotcha.
My wife, producer Ashley, is like, "What about Animal Farm?" We didn't have to read Animal Farm. It wasn't part of our assigned reading. So I
got a Midsummer Night's Dream.
Is that in your honorable mention, Don?
No, in my honorable mention, I've got The Crucible. I'm not really going to go any more detail on it, and Hatchet, which I forgot about Hatchet, threw it in my honorable mention once you said it, and then that's where it lives now.
And we all, I think, thought up, oh man, I forgot about insert book here, but that is our honorable mention. Before we do our number ones, let's go ahead and go through our 5 through 2. So I'm going to give my number 1 first because I feel like maybe we all might have the same number 1.
I doubt it.
All right. So then did you forget about number 1? Okay. So my number 5 was Hatchet. Number 4 was The Outsiders. Number 3 was Of Mice and Men. Number 2 was The Crucible. And my number 1, which it's up there in my favorite books of all time, is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. We read it as sophomores in high school. So at the same time, I think before we read Of Mice and Men, we read To Kill a Mockingbird, a significantly larger book with as many dark themes. And I think it starts to, in the similar vein of The Outsiders, of where you think life's so terrible in Western Ohio, and then this book puts you in the shoes of a young girl, but who lives in a town where racism is still alive and well, and for lack of a better term, for alive and well, and the themes that go into living your life, and the character Atticus Finch is this really honorable and noble character that a lot of folks, I think, should strive to live up to, that has morals and has integrity and has honesty and believes in what he believes and sticks by those, even when it's not easy or convenient or fun. He has convictions and he follows them. And I think that's somebody that a lot of folks today could learn a lot from and should try to learn a lot from. But I think it's one of the best books written in American literature, and I've got it at number 1 on my list.
Harper Lee is one of the few authors that I know who it is.
Oh, that's right. Right. That book,
Right.
Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right. And then him and F. Scott Fitzgerald.
She.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm looking at a picture of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and so I got a little twisted on it, but not my number one.
Did you forget To Kill a Mockingbird existed? Or
No, I had To Kill a Mockingbird on my list. Moved it out of the honorable mention.
Wow.
For Hatchet.
Gotcha. All right. So that is my number one. Zach, what about you?
I also have To Kill a Mockingbird at number one.
Great book.
It's an absolutely great book. One of my favorite Simpsons jokes ever is Homer says that To Kill a Mockingbird book was terrible. It didn't teach me anything about killing anything. Taught me not to judge man by the color of the skin, but when am I ever going to use that? But no, I mean, it is just an absolute fantastic book. You know,
it really pisses you off at the end of the day.
It does.
It's very clear Tom Robinson is innocent,
right?
And
because he's left-handed, like he doesn't have one arm,
right?
Well,
his hand got caught in a cotton gin, and so it's all messed up.
Right.
But her one side of her face, and Atticus Finch makes his case perfectly. Everybody in the courtroom knows it, and 12 white people still convict him. It just chaps your ass when you're 16 years old.
And then,
but that stuff still goes on today, and it just. Ugh.
But then. You know, Atticus says when they're taking him back to jail, he was like, we knew we were going to lose the first one. We're going to appeal it and everything's going to be fine. And then, spoiler alert, they lynch him before they can even take him to be sentenced and he can appeal. They lynch Tom. And
when it's very clear
that he was innocent, that he was just there to bust up an old shiffer robe and gets accused of raping a white woman.
Well, it's very clear he didn't.
And it's very clear that it was probably her dad that did it. But like you said, Atticus Finch is just a great moral character. I actually have a friend who named his son Atticus because he loved this book so much.
Like my wife and I have talked about, like, if we ever have a daughter, I would love to name, like, my middle name is Lee. I would love to name our daughter Harper Lee. 100%, straight up. That's how highly I think of the book. So there you go.
Yeah.
So Don's like, yeah, so I really loved If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. It's just got deep themes that... that's not fair to you. I'm sorry.
But you really have to look really hard, and if you give a moose a muffin, because get out of here with your mouse a cookie book.
Oh, well, okay.
Moose a muffin is the one true God.
But like but for real, if you give a moose a muffin, it's so true.
Right. If you give a moose a muffin, they want a glass of milk to go with it.
Like if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. Is what they're teaching you.
Then if you give him milk, then he's going to pop off his button. If you give him a button, he's going to need like sewing needle and thread.
Eventually, he's going to be sleeping in your house. He and his buddies are doing meth back in your shed, and you got a big problem in your hands.
I think you read a different book.
And you're going to jail for a felony.
Who wrote that? Like, was it Muffet? Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet. So like it's. Because I can picture that book, like
right?
The images in that book.
So, were you a moose a muffin household or a mouse a cookie household?
We had both.
Okay,
Also,
I didn't know that a mouse a cookie.
Right, you're like, it's not if you give a mouse a cookie. I'm
like, if you give a moose a muffin, sure. There's a mouse like on every page, like stealing crumbs or doing something.
Laura Numeroff.
Okay, yeah. Can you say that in English?
Laura Numeroff.
Had to sound it out. It's a weird name. And I don't read so good.
Don's number one is not To Kill a Mockingbird.
It's not.
Also not If You Give a Moose a Muffin. It is Watership Down. I
love
that
Watership
book is
Down.
So terrible.
See, get out of here, because that's what books are for. Their books are made for different people. I didn't really like To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, as you guys talked about it, I was like, I started to remember more and more stuff about it. Like I couldn't think of anything other than Harper Lee when I was thinking of To Kill a Mockingbird. But as you guys talked about it, I was like, yeah. So, I mean, it's probably better than I remember it, because I read it while I was at work, like sophomore year of high school, waiting tables, and nobody's in there and going to read it for 2 hours to get the bare minimum in and then go on with it. It was like The Great Gatsby for me. I read it. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
But no, I mean, the ending did piss me off. But Watership Down was just, for whatever reason, that book was the first book that I was assigned, like in high school, that I enjoyed reading and didn't want to put down and like read ahead. Like when we got assigned that, we were seniors in high school.
Yeah, I think we were
we were seniors in high school, and it was in the spring because I was at track meets. I get done throwing, and we had to wait like 2 hours for the runners to get done. And I sat there and I read Watership Down and knocked the whole book out in like a week and was super like it. I was excited to write the reports on Watership Down.
See,
for whatever reason, it just clicked with me.
You're not the only one in our grade or in our class or in our group of friends that felt that way too. There were folks that had probably never picked up a book that they were assigned to in the 6 years, and were like, we're reading a stupid book about rabbits. Like, at the end of the day, it's like the movie is cartoon rabbits, and you expect me to read this? And then they read it and were like, this is awesome.
Right.
I mean, I hated it.
I loved Watership Down. I don't.
Fiverr and Bigwig, and
Fiverr and
look out for the
Bigwig.
Harudadoos.
The Harudadoos, which are cars.
I still use Harudadoos
because that's the sound that it makes, and so that's what rabbits are calling like cars and tractors. It's based on like the 1930s, and like an interesting fact about it, you had to get all the way to the end to know this, but it's written in the little post notes, whatever you call that. I'm not a book reader, I don't know. In the postscript,
sure,
on the back cover, it's written that like this guy originally wrote the book because he was like putting his daughter like down for bed, and she was like, "Tell me a story, Dad." And so he started telling her the story, and he was telling her the story of Watership Down off the top of his head. And after like however many nights in a row, he was like, "Oh crap, I'm going to write a book now," and wrote down the book that he told his daughter as a story for a good night story. And it for it being based on anamorphic rabbits, essentially, they did a really good job of like personalizing them and giving them like all different personalities and making me interested in who lives and who dies, and choreographing this awesome fight between frickin' rabbits, like in territory wars.
Yeah,
and
it makes you care about rabbits that
I don't care about.
Like it's the outsider. Yeah, it's the outsiders, but for rabbits.
And then
at the end of the day,
and then they showed us the cartoon, which was the one time I didn't want to see a cartoon. It was like this LSD fever dream of a cartoon that was just like running colors.
It was just that one scene where they like gas them, isn't it? That's like all
LSD. The whole thing is super sketchy.
Right. It's poorly animated.
They remade it like on Netflix.
BBC remade it like 2 years ago, and it looks like The Lion King, like the remake of The Lion King with just hyper realistic graphics, and it's amazing on Netflix.
Well, I'm going to check that out.
Honestly, I know that you haven't watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids yet. And we can put that on the back burner
to watch.
I want you to watch Watership Down, the BBC series, because it's freaking dope.
I will find the time to watch the Watership Down BBC live action. It's not live action, I know, but I will find the time to watch it. So those are our favorite books that we had to read in high school. You can give us your thoughts, your reaction at Rankum Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. You can also comment on our YouTube video. It'll be up of this. We are wherever you can find your podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, and we are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube at Rankum Podcast. Zach, thanks for hopping in the studio again. Appreciate having you with us here to talk about books we read in high school. First, maybe we can get you some more non-food episodes coming up.
Appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
You can't find Zach on Twitter. You can, but it doesn't like us to give it out. Don, what is your Twitter handle?
Donnie_G.
At Donnie_G. I am at Garrett Seawright, 2 R's and 2 T's, and we are the Rankum Podcast. You can find us at Rankum Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, give us 5-star review, share, tell your friends, however you can help us out. We certainly appreciate it. We're just a couple of guys having fun in my spare bedroom that we call a studio. This is the Rankum Podcast. Thanks for joining us for another edition.